Hey folks, welcome to the show. Let's talk about defensive forwards and Selke rankings. You'll notice this whole list is pretty long. It's hard to really condense them, and there's a lot more I wanted to talk about, but I just had to condense the forwards. One way I did it was by only including guys who actually was scoring too. There's some guys who didn't score, and scoring isn't a defensive metric, but I'll get to that. You'll also notice one reason I can get away with a long list is you'll also notice when you do look at Selke voting, it's usually quite a long list because there's rarely a consensus. It's one of the reasons Patrice Bergeron is so legendary, not only because he won 6 Selke trophies, but because there was a consensus that, okay, yeah, he's one of the best. It was pretty hard to have anybody say, no, he wasn't. Granted, he did have some name power favoring him at times, but I think he deserved it completely last year, as did most people, and most importantly, the voters. So I did what I could. I tried to include guys who have been talked about in the Selke Trophy as well, and I included guys who I just felt like are having a really good defensive season. I'm going to talk about 3 guys who aren't on this list first, but not before I go over some of these stats. Actually, no, I will talk about 3 guys first. So there's 3 notable names I left off the list. First is Anze Kopitar. I did not include him, not as a slight to him. I just felt his defensive numbers weren't uh, as good as some of these guys on here. And there's 2 LA guys who I think are even having a better defensive year than him, forwards wise. Because obviously Doughty's better defensively, but that's because he's a defenseman and one of the best defensive defensemen ever. Anyways, the other 2 are stars who don't get talked enough about their defensive game, and some people might laugh when they hear their names included in a defensive system, and that's McDavid and Matthews. However, if you watch them, you know they are good. If you want to find out if somebody's actually watched an Oilers game, ask them if they think McDavid backchecks. If they say no, he doesn't, they've never watched a game or they're blind. Um, McDavid absolutely does backcheck, and he absolutely has the talent to be a Selke winner if he wants to. And I'll get to Matthews. I'm just going to focus on McDavid first because I think he is. I'm not going to say better defensively. He is better defensively this year, but it's tough. And there's a reason I haven't included them, and I'll get to that. You can watch him. You can see how well he backchecks, and it helps that he is strong, tough, good with a stick, and really, really fast. His 5-on-5 defensive numbers have been incredible. So whether you're going by his metrics, 5-on-5, or eye test, you can see he's got the talent to win a Selke if he wants. And I think it'd be really cool to see a guy who's not only been a league leading scorer but also nabbed a Selke. I don't think he'll get one in his career, but I think he could. And I think last year he should have gotten some consideration. But there's a reason I'm not considering him this year, and it's the same for Matthews. But let's talk about Matthews first because he is also very notable. He's one of the best blockers by a forward in the league, which is some people have argued against its defensive worthiness, and I'll get to that later. But I think it is very notable, especially as a forward, to be able to block. And again, I mentioned this before, as a goalie, I appreciate it. I think it helps, and that's what matters, right? The goalie's opinion. Not that I'm an NHL goalie, but still. So that is Matthews' most notable strength defensively, but he is one of the, like Matt McDavid, up there in takeaways. He has a lot of takeaways, and his metrics are also very good. And speaking of takeaways, there's another guy I didn't mention that is not on here, and that's Leon Draisaitl. I didn't include him. People also might snicker about his defensive abilities, but as I said in one review, he's the best defensive forward in the league when he's not in the defensive zone. Because I don't see him play defense much in or I would say he plays it, but it's not like notable defense in defensive zone. But he gets a lot of takeaways, and most of them, I'd imagine, I don't have the numbers, but just from watching, it feels like the vast majority of them are in the neutral or offensive zones. His other strength is face-off percentages, which will give you votes because one of the best ways to win, or one of the best ways to not allow a goal, is by having the puck. That was Paul Coffey's theory of defense, and that's what that theory of defense helped the Oilers win a lot in the 80s, was that they can't score if we have the puck. Granted, Calgary Flames did score when Steve Smith had the puck and bounced it off Grant Fuhr's leg and into the net, but you get my point. And Steve Smith actually went on to be a great defensive defenseman. I'm not going to knock him. He was harder on himself. I think that deserves its own video. I love Steve Smith, but my point is, face-offs will happen. It's why I included points, because I think it's also important that you're also able to not only prevent the puck from going into your net, but you're good enough to make the puck go the other way and even score. But we'll get to that when I get there. The reason I didn't include those three guys, McDavid, Draisaitl, and Matthews, is I think it's important to not only be really good 5-on-5 defense, but to have a lot of shorthanded time. And none of those guys have over a minute of shorthanded time. And there's lots of other guys who are very good defensively as forwards, but I didn't include because they don't get shorthanded time. And it's not that those guys can't be good players shorthanded. I think McDavid certainly can. I'm sure Matthews certainly can. McDavid did get quite a bit last year, and they still get an okay amount. But I figured you have to have at least 90 seconds of shorthanded time a game to, in my opinion, to be included in the Selke race. So that was my opinion. So that's why those guys aren't on here, but I think all three of those, plus Kopitar, all deserve an honorable mention. So let's get to the legend, the stats here. I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of them by now. Games played, points, your plus minus, which, yes, is overrated and overused, but I think it's, when it gets to a high enough point or a low enough point, I think it is notable. Goals for percentage, so the amount of goals scored while you're on the ice that your team scored. Average time on ice, I think, is a good way of telling how much your coach trusts you, which could include your offensive abilities as well. But I think the higher your time on ice, more coach trusts you outside of offense, but defense as well. Though I don't think it's necessary to have a high time on ice to win the Selke. We'll get to it. Fenwick 4 percentage, I've talked a lot about that. So the amount of shots your team controls while you're on the ice, and that's the relative number. So your team's relative success in controlling the shots while you're on the ice. Defensive zone start percentage, I think this is important. It will get skewed for guys who are talented offensively, like Barkov. But it is important to note the guys who get a ton of trust in the defensive zone. It is their area of expertise. Hits, not a great defensive metric as it used to be, but I think it's still notable. It's still okay. It's not a bad one. It's just no longer exceptional. It's just kind of, it's all right. Blocks, I think it's a good one. Not the greatest, but it's a good one. Takeaways, great one, especially as a forward. Forwards get a lot more takeaways than defensemen do, so I think high takeaways is a really good example. Face-off percentage, I talked about with Draisaitl, how important that is. Obviously, not everybody's going to have access to this number because a lot of these guys are wingers too, and that's why you'll see centermen win the Selke a lot more. Not only because centermen will play down low on defense more often, but because they take face-offs. I talked about the importance of shorthanded time as well. That's this. These last three numbers are all shorthanded. So the amount of time, and then the goals for your team scores per 60 minutes, shorthanded while you're on the ice, and goals against. Not really going to focus on those numbers too much, but they're kind of there for fun. Now the blue, it does not mean that you're the league leader if you have a blue number on here. It just means among the guys here. There'd be a lot less blue if I did league leader stuff. So if you're a top 5 in one of the numbers among guys on here, then it's going to be in blue. All right, without further ado, let's get into it. Mikhail Backlund for Calgary, I think has a real shot at winning the Selke this year. He does get a lot of defensive zone starts, 62.2%, and he's still managed, despite, that's a very high number, by the way, despite that, he's still a +9, this is where I think plus minus is important, is that if you're able to be a plus player while starting the majority of your shifts in the defensive zone, that's very impressive, and it's reflected in his goals for percentage as well, and a strong Fenwick 4. So when he's on the ice, it's usually starting the defensive zone, and if he doesn't win the faceoff, which is kind of iffy on, him or his line will get a takeaway. He has 49 on the year, when I wrote this down, I forgot to mention these come from the weekend, so these stats aren't updated, but they're going to change all the time. There isn't any major changes in these stats. If you look now or tomorrow, they're always changing, obviously. But anyways, so as of the weekend, he's probably going to take away the puck, and the puck is sooner or later going to end up in the other team's zone more often than not. So very impressive play by Backlund defensively, and he does that on the PK as well. Next is Barkov, previous Selke winner, and I actually don't think he's the best defensive forward on his team, surprisingly, but that's no slight to him. He has been incredible defensively, as he always is. I feel like we're obligated to call him the most underrated player. I don't think he is anymore because everyone calls them that, so I don't think he can be underrated when everyone considers you underrated, but I just feel like it has to be mentioned at this point. He does have a lot of points among these defensive forwards, and he's a plus 24. Florida just controls the game when he's on the ice, and as part of it is because of his line mates, but he is the leader among those line mates and the best player among those line mates, and it's because of him more than anyone else on his line that Florida controls the pace of play. Part of it is because he is dominant in the face-off circle, nearly 58%, and his team controls nearly 60% of the shots when he's on the ice. Granted, that is because his defensive zone start percentage is around 50-50, but still just incredible numbers there. He has been physical, has been able to block lots of takeaways. Short-handed time on ice isn't like super heavy as some of these other guys, but he does get lots of it and is very elite there as well. Nick Bukestad, a guy I really liked having in Edmonton for the short while. He's got all the physical talent to be a Selke winner because he's just so tall and physically gifted. I think maybe if he's better with his stick, or maybe teammates who knows defensive system, he could launch into there. I don't think he's top 5 this year, but I did want to mention him because he is one of the more physically capable guys here who is also still good with his stick. 27 takeaways isn't bad. Has a heavy short-handed time on ice, and he does start 59% of his shifts in the defensive zone. Next is Cirelli, who's emerged in the last couple of years as yet another Tampa Bay bottom 6 forward who is very notable. He is a -8, 46.3 goals for percentage, but that's more of the fact that he is playing in defensive positions more than offensive positions, as noted by his defensive zone start percentage. He's also a very capable blocker, and he has been kind of a do-everything guy on defense for Tampa, as is a lot of these guys. Cal Clutterbuck, he has one of the uglier Fenwick 4 percentages on here, but I think it's very forgivable because he starts a whopping 73.5% of his shifts in the defensive zone, and despite that, has managed to have a 55% goals for share or his team, scores 55% of the goals while he's on the ice, which is super impressive when, again, he's nearly 75% of the time he's on the ice, where starts is in the defensive zone. His defensive game is mostly his ability to hit. He has 210 hits, but has been a decent blocker, good with his stick as well, and he'll get lots of penalty kill time as well. Charlie Coyle, he's no Patrice Bergeron, but he's certainly a lot closer than anybody anticipated him to be. He has really stepped up offensively, 51 points in 65 games, but more important to this video, defensively as well. He has a heavy amount of time shorthanded, over 2.5 minutes. He's been physical, 98 hits, 43 blocks, and 44 takeaways. Decent in the face-off circle with 52%, or that's not just decent, that's pretty good. Analytics aren't too hot, but that's because he starts nearly 60% in the defensive zone. So he's been very excellent, and a big reason why Boston's been able to continue winning without having a premier center. Speaking of premier defensive centers, Philip Denault is, when you're watching him, he will win the eye test a lot defensively. The fact that he will often play against the other team's opponent's top lines and still manage to control the game with his line out nearly 60% of the shots is absurd. he doesn't start in the defensive zone all the time. It's pretty 50-50, but it is able to control the ice very well while he's there, and he's been physical as well, 50 blocks most notably. Jason Dickinson has been a pleasant surprise for Chicago, not only in the physical department at 105 hits, but on the defensive side, he's a plus 4.1 in the relative Fenwick 4, which isn't the hardest thing to do to beat when you're on Chicago, because a lot of the guys on there don't have good Fenwick 4 percentages, but it is very impressive considering the fact that he starts 61.3% of his shifts in the defensive zone. He's also been an effective penalty killer for Chicago, and he's has some offense to him too. So great pickup for Chicago to have him. Nick Dowd, he was a target for a couple teams, including the Oilers, for a bottom six defensive forward because he controls the game very well in terms of goals, which is most important. Shots, not so much, but that's partly because he starts 88.2% of his shifts in the defensive zone and still manages to be a plus 8, still manages to have a 59.5 goals for percentages. He's been a decent, very good blocker too, actually, not just decent, 57 blocks. A lot of that comes on the penalty kill, in which he spends 2 minutes and 31 seconds per game. Jack Eichel. If you said at the beginning of the year Jack Eichel could have some Selke talk with him, you might get a lot of raised eyebrows, including from Jack Eichel fans, but he's really emerged as an effective defensive defenseman and is very comparable to Mark Stone, a very notable name I did not include on this list because he's unlikely to play a lot. It's hard to vote for a Selke winner when they didn't play 50 games. Anyways, Jack Eichel, who is back from injury, he is a -1 on Vegas, which might be a little concerning, but I think a lot of that is because he's playing against opponents, the toughest opponents, and is sorry, when I mean playing against the toughest opponents, it's the toughest lines of the opponents. That's how I should say it. It is a little concerning, but it is also especially concerning when he has one of the lower defensive zone start percentages here at 39.8. That is because of his offense. He has a point per game, but don't let that fool you. He has one of the highest takeaway numbers. He's a takeaway per game player, which I don't think anybody else here is. He has 20 hits and 40 blocks, so 40 blocks is quite notable, not too physical. Excuse me as I bend down for my charger because my laptop is low, but I am still talking. Anyways, really exception for Jack Eichel. I don't think Vegas got Jack Eichel for his defense, but they got defense from Jack Eichel anyways, which I'm sure they're happy with, especially with Stone having health issues. Jake Evans, I wouldn't call him the most impressive defensive player here, but I felt it was important to include him because he does lead the league in shorthanded time on ice by a forward at 3 minutes and 7 seconds, and he has been all right for Montreal. Offense, not so much, 21.63 games as he is a bottom six forward, but he does get a lot of defensive starts. He does play the body well, 65 hits, 50 blocks, and like I said, it has been their most relied upon penalty killer among forwards. Greenway for Minnesota doesn't get a lot of talk either, 21 points in 52 games, but he has been one of their best penalty killers at with nearly 3 minutes per game and a pretty good effective penalty killer as well, with very low goals against per 60 minutes shorthanded wise. He's also has triple digits hits, 101, 51 blocks is also very notable for him, so that's going for him. Adam Henrique, I did not put him on here because he's an Oiler. It just so happened that he's on here. I knew he had defensive prowess. I just didn't know how impressive it was. I think the fact that he is a +3 on the Anaheim Ducks is notable. His Fenwick 4 percentage is all right. Well, I mean, it's below average, but considering he's on Anaheim, it's all right. When I wrote down these stats, he'd only played one game for Edmonton, and I know I put his team as Edmonton, but that's because if he does win it, which I don't think he will, it would be as an Edmonton Oiler, not as an Anaheim Duck. Anyways, he does start a lot of his shifts in defensive zone because he's trusted there, and he is very good at it. 57 blocks is pretty good, and he's also very good in the faceoff circle at 53%. And he does play a lot of penalty killing minutes. Matthew Joseph has emerged lately as a defensive forward for the Ottawa Senators. Strong analytics in his shorter amount of time on ice. It's a decent time on ice, but not as high as other guys here at 16 minutes, 33 seconds. A minute and 46 of those is spent on the shorthanded. He's been a decent guy physically as well. 75 hits in 51 games, 34 blocks, and most notably 46 takeaways. Alexander Kerfoot is another Arizona Coyote to mention here. I would like to shout out Nick Schmaltz, but he's not on here because he doesn't get a lot of penalty kill time because of Kerfoot and Bukestad. Kerfoot does play 2 minutes and 44 seconds of penalty killing time. He's got 49 hits, 57 blocks, and 33 takeaways. Very effective. Starts majority of his shifts defensively, and his analytics are below average, but considering he's on Arizona and is usually playing defensive more often than not, it's very much forgivable and almost impressive to an extent. Adam Lowry is really been a great captain for Winnipeg so far. I think a lot of Winnipeg fans really appreciated him getting chosen, and he's really has taken that super seriously and has been a big part of Winnipeg's on-ice success. The plus 16 is very notable. Again, plus minus, it's very easily swayed, so it's not a reliable stat, but I think when it's that high, it is important, and it's also very notable when that he has a 61.4 goals for percentage when he is starting 62.6% of his shifts in the defensive zone. His face-off is a little low. You'd like to see it higher for a guy who starts a lot in the defensive zone. But again, his shift usually involves taking the puck away, bringing it down. And it does help that Connor Hellebuck is usually the goalie behind you, so you're not usually going to allow goals. Usually, Adam Lowry's goalie is better than the guy on the other end of the ice, so that is going to help his plus-minus and goals for percentage. But still, not really going to take away too much from him there. He's still effective in controlling shots while he's on the ice. 53.5%. Fenwick 4 is in his favor. He's been also very physical. 133 hits, 54 blocks as well, and 27 takeaways. And also another good penalty killer at over 2 minutes. I keep saying good penalty killer, but all these guys are, so maybe I should stop mentioning that unless it's an out there number. But because again, all these guys are notable on the penalty kill, especially Mallinston, I believe how it's pronounced. I don't think he'll get too much consideration because he only plays 14 minutes and 10 seconds a game and doesn't. That's the main part. I was going to say 18 points, but again, points aren't a defensive metric, but usually guy when he wins the Selke, he usually has more than 20 points on a year. And he still might hit it lots of time. I should say more than 30 points on a year. So anyways, his analytics are ugly, but the fact that despite only controlling 40% of the shots while he's on the ice, his team does score 55.8% of the goals, so very good. And that does help that Charlie Lindgren has been very good, and Darcy Kemper has been very good half the time. He has been Jekyll and Hyde this year more than anyone. And it's also very forgivable when nearly 90% of Mallinston's starts are in the defensive zone. He's also been one of the most physical guys here, 168 hits and 70 blocks for the forward, while also having one of the heaviest shorthanded time, 2 minutes and 46 seconds. Washington has become quite a defensive team, and part of it is because of Mallinston and Nick Dowd's play. Mitch Marner, if there's a winger who can break the center's grip hold on Selke's, it very well could be Mitch Marner. A lot of people, including myself, thought it might be Mark Stone, but with his health injuries or issues, it might be Mitch Marner. His numbers all across the board are very impressive. The only thing working against him is that his defensive zone start percentage is below 50 at 42.9, but the reason of that is because he has 76 points in 61 games. So that is going to inflate his analytics when you're starting that much in the offensive zone, but that still doesn't take away from the fact that he still has 55% Fenwick 4 percentage plus 5.3 relative, and has controlled 58.5% of the goals while he's on the ice, which is a lot. 21 minutes and 20 seconds, I believe, is the largest time here. McKinnon's is the most at 23 minutes, but here, among these forwards, Mitch Marner leads, and just over 2 minutes of that is on the penalty kill. When you watch him, you know he's very smart, and his best ability defensively is takeaways. 48 is a very impressive number, but he's been a decent hitter for a smaller forward, and 46 blocks is also quite notable. Next is the other LA King that isn't Kopitar, Trevor Moore. It is arguable that part of his defensive excellence has been because of his time with Denal, but I'm not going to take that away from him too much. He still has been good defensively, still controls the shots very well at nearly 60% in his 18 minutes of time on ice. Well, the 60% is a 5-on-5 number. I didn't include his 5-on-5 time on ice, but still, a lot of it is still very impressive. Doesn't have the heaviest penalty killing number here, but I still felt it was notable to include Trevor Moore for his abilities defensively. Next is Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. One thing going for him, I'm just going to scroll all the way down here. One thing going for Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is voters are looking at whatever they can, and you don't often see defensive play be a highlight reel, and Nugent-Hopkins has had 2 back checks become a highlight reel in the last week. Both very impressive in game saving. I think only one of them led to a win, but still, they were game saving in their own right. His offense is already impressive, and that's why he was drafted to the team in the first place. But he is one of the most smart and cerebral players you can watch. He is most of his time on ice is going to be spent on the power play and in the offensive zone, as seen by his lower defensive zone start percentage at 41.6. So that does help his analytics, but that doesn't take away from the fact that he has been excellent defensively. He has been one of the Oilers' best penalty killers, but doesn't get 2 minutes on ice because Edmonton's penalty kill is quite good at shift change, and because Derek Ryan has been quite good there. So, but that is going to be a knock on Nugent-Hopkins, is that, in my opinion, I don't know how much the voters look at it, but in my opinion, that is going to be a knock on Nugent-Hopkins, that he isn't at 2 minutes of penalty kill. But either way, he has been very good there. He has been one of the best defensive forwards to watch from the Oilers' perspective in a long while. That's really emerged, I would say last year he really emerged in that aspect. Not that it wasn't always there, but it just wasn't noticeable, at least in my eyes, till last year. Next is Ryan O'Reilly. He has won a Selke before. Going against him is that he starts only 40% of his shifts in the defensive zone, but he has still been very effective. 52 takeaways is one of the best numbers in the league. He has been very effective in the faceoff circle at 54.3%. It does get lots of penalty kill time, as everyone else does here, but not quite 2 minutes. He doesn't quite play 20 minutes for Nashville Predators, but his analytics have been strong. Poling is a forward for the Philadelphia Flyers, who has, like many of the Flyers, really surged this year. His strengths defensively has been on the penalty kill. He has the league of the guys here. He has the best goals for per 60 minutes on the penalty kill, and goals against as a team, not personal numbers, as a team goals against per 60 minutes on the penalty kill, which again he does, like everyone else here, plays nearly 2 minutes of that. He also has the most blocks of the guys here at 77. It doesn't get a lot of 5-on-5 play, and it always isn't the most notable. It's just kind of there, but I just felt being one of the better penalty killers here, and I think, the best blocker among forwards. Should get a mention here. Sam Reinhart is the guy, in my opinion, who has usurped Alexander Barkov as the best defensive forward for the Florida Panthers, and who would have thought? I don't think he's always been known as a defensive forward. He's been known for his offensive talent, as he is in the not Art Ross, the Richard race, which again 75 points, among 64 points. He there for his offense, but he has been excellent defensively, and in my opinion, better than Barkov. As I said, there's a lot more blue here on his row, including his 5-on-5 numbers with strong goals for percentage of +20, strong Fenwick for percentage 58.4, and a +5.5 relative. He also has 2.3. The Panthers have 2.3 goals for per 60 minutes, while Reinhart is playing on the penalty kill, which he does 2 minutes and 4 seconds of. Unlike Barkov, he is closer to the 50% when it comes to defensive zone start percentage, so he is used in defensive zones more often than Barkov, which I think is telling. He has been really excellent. Not so as much as you want to talk about how much he's exploded offensively, also talk about how he's exploded, perhaps even more so defensively. Is it because he's on a contract year? Yeah, probably, but that's okay. Next is Jordan Staal. All the Staal brothers have ability to play defense, and I think Jordan Staal exemplified it the best, besides Mark Staal, who is a defenseman. But among the forward Staal brothers, it's Jordan Staal. He, as a Carolina Hurricane, has been part of the reason the Hurricanes are able to control the shots very well. The Hurricanes control 62.9% of the shots while he's on the ice, which is especially impressive considering he starts 53.9% of his shifts in the defensive zone. And part of that helps because he has the best face-off number here of these forwards that I've mentioned at 58.5%. He's also been a good hitter, 118 hits, and he does go over the 2-minute mark on penalty killing time. The knock on him is that the Hurricanes don't control the goals when he's on the ice. He's a -11, controls 42.3% of the goals while he's on the ice. That does have to do with goaltending a lot as well, which is a team issue, not a Jordan Staal issue. But at the end of the day, I think that is going to be a knock on him, and it is in my mind. Next is Brandon Tanev, a fan favorite, as well as his brother, because of his hard-nosed play and his headshots. Not like body checking. You know what I mean. He doesn't get a lot of time on ice, which is going to be a knock in my eyes. He only plays 14.5 minutes per game, but 2 minutes and 39 seconds of those is penalty killing. He has been physical, 96 hits, 49 blocks, 25 takeaways is all right. Does play most of the game in the defensive zone, which has led to some less impressive analytics in terms of Fenwick for percentage, but has maintained a good goals for percentage at 57.1. Second last on here is Robert Thomas, more known for his passing ability, as noted by his 69 points in 63 games, but he has been very good with his stick defensively with 52 takeaways. He's not a physical player defensively at only 15 hits, but the 52 takeaways more than makes up for it. He has been a good penalty killer, but is under the 2-minute mark there. Doesn't have a lot of blocks, but the +8.4 Fenwick 4 percentage is extremely impressive. And last here is Alex Took. Not a lot of impressive number. Well, not that his numbers here that I've noted are bad, just compared to all these other guys are not super impressive. But it is worth noting that he has 62 hits, 52 blocks, and has the most takeaways of guys here at 55. But he only has 90 seconds of penalty kill time, which is impressive, but again, of the guys here, isn't a lot. So that is the long list of 27 forwards I wanted to talk about. So who are the guys who I think really have a shot, or at least if I had to vote right now, I wrote it down here. If I had to pick, and it was really hard to choose, you can convince me of the top four could all be number one. But I decided to put Marner first. I think he's been the most impressive. Second is Backlund. And now that I'm saying it, I might switch those two because it's so close and they have different abilities defensively. Third and fourth are the two Florida Panthers, Reinhardt and Barkov. I don't like having two players of the same team in the top five for Selke, but they've just been both so good. I don't want to punish Reinhardt for having Barkov, and I don't want to punish Barkov for having Reinhardt. But I am punishing Barkov a little bit because Reinhardt has been there. So I think all four of those guys have a really good shot. But I also wanted to mention Nugent Hopkins. Part of that is because of the eye test. Obviously, I've had more time watching him than anybody else here, and I have always been super impressed with him this year. I can't think of many times where I was like, Nuge, come on. He always seems to be the smartest guy on the ice for the Oilers. And he's really been the heart of the team and has become a fan favorite for his time there. That doesn't matter for the Selke. I'm getting on a tangent. But I guess he would be my fifth, but you can easily put in another guy here. Like Eichel. There was a time earlier in the year, a couple months ago, where I was like, he's my favorite actually right now. And then he got injured, and I felt like he was slowing down, and some of these other numbers were getting higher for other players. So technically that's six guys I mentioned. I try to keep it to five because when a guy votes, he gets to choose five players. So Eichel technically shouldn't be there. But we'll see who the voters look at. Hopefully it doesn't have too much to do with name, brand, because that does happen, especially with Selke rankings. But hopefully that's not the case. Please let me know who you've enjoyed watching in terms of defensive forwards. Who among these guys you think is the best? Who do you think should win it or will win it? Because it might change in the next 20 games. Some guy might go on a heater in terms of defense. But that's it for now for this long video. Thank you so much for watching or using me as white noise. Either is okay. I hope you have a great, wonderful rest of your morning, afternoon, night, wherever you're at in it. Please leave a like if you think I've earned it. It does help, as well as subscribing and turning on notifications. I do have my deadline videos coming up. As I keep teasing, I've teased it a lot in pretty much every video, but you can see it up on the top of my tabs there that it is pretty much ready to go. It's so long that I've decided to split it up into divisions instead of one big long 2-hour long thing. Anyways, if you have notifications on, you will be notified when that awesome Ultimate Guide video is out. And the first one should be out this week, as I keep alluding to. Sounds like I should do it, not just say it. But anyways, that's it for me. Thank you again so much, and I will see you when I see you.